Is magic fundamentally about power, or is it about something else? When I first wrote Sesopemy, I suggested that in place of two cultures, arts and sciences, that we should see four cultures: art, religion, science and magic. And I pointed out that these cultures overlap. They're not four separate discrete boxes. They're better seen as directions. And so, speaking loosely, you could say the arts culture is movement towards the beautiful. And in those terms, the religious culture is movement towards the good, whether it's the good as God or the common good in political terms. And scientific culture is towards the truth, in which case, what is magic towards? Now, I think there's a strong opinion that magic is towards power, but I didn't find that in my own life. I would say it is towards wholeness or completion. Now, it is true that a lot of people take up magic with a desire for power, because the preceding religious and scientific cultures are in a sense disempowering, in that the religious culture says, nothing can happen unless it's the will of God, and the scientific culture says nothing can happen unless the laws of physics allow it. And so there is that claustrophobic feeling in many of us. Oh God, I just want to do something directly. I don't want all this crap limiting me. And so it is very nice to think, that you can do a few spells and make anything happen. And I parodied that in the essay Blast Your Way to Megabucks by saying, 1, I want to be rich, powerful, successful. 2, hey, there's this thing called magic that promises to make me rich, powerful and successful. 3, great, all I have to do is to make myself perfect. 4, how will I know when I'm perfect? Answer, when I no longer want to be rich, powerful and successful. Oh shit. Now that is exaggeration, but there is a truth in that people who seriously get into magic find that before they can do these spells and things, they actually have to work on themselves a lot. There's a lot of inner work involved. And even in just one particular thing, like I want to be rich, it often begins with trying to contact that part of oneself, which is richness. Either in a New Age sense, you've got to sort of find your inner rich man, or else if you're doing a traditional ritual magician, how do you contact the spirit of Jupiter if you cannot find it in yourself? So I think that power isn't the absolute reason for doing it. It may be the reason that attracts people into the culture, but you could say that of other cultures. I mean, artistic culture, the person who wants to become a rock musician really wants the power of being able to stand on stage and make thousands of people scream. The person who joins a religious organization must be tempted by the power of getting on the right side. And the scientist must have some idea on, finding out about nature in order to be able to do powerful things and make things happen. So I don't think it's only magic, although it is more extreme in the case of magical culture. The other thing is, I think that I think people confuse power and strength, and they equate them. They talk about a strong person, the positions of power and things like that. And I think it's helpful to see a distinction there. Now, to illustrate that distinction in the sort of most black and white terms, I think imagine a young pharaoh, sort of 7 years old or something, son of the pharaoh, who's got his slave. Now, at that childish age, there isn't much difference between them. They'll be formal in court and know their place, but they get out into the fields and they're rough and tumble and they wrestle and they become good chums and all that sort of thing. Pretty much on the level. And then one day the young pharaoh is feeling a bit tired and a bit under the weather. And so he realizes he can order the slave to carry him back. And so he does so. Now at that point, the slave carrying him back has given away his power to the Pharaoh. And the more times the Pharaoh does that, the more the slave loses his power to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh realizes he can order the slave any time to take him anywhere. But at the same time, the Pharaoh is becoming weaker. The slave, through carrying him, is becoming stronger. And then the time comes when the Pharaoh can't go anywhere without being carried by a slave. Now that's an extreme case, but you see the same principle working in many relationships where an easygoing person is with someone who has got very strong demands. So the easygoing person, perhaps they've got a free afternoon, he doesn't want to do anything too cultural, and so he says, hey, we've got a free afternoon, let's go and watch football. And the partner says, I can't stand football, absolutely not. Easy person, oh well, what would you like to do? Well, there's this Mozart concert going on. Easygoing person, but gives in and goes along. And unless that easygoing person has got a hang-up about Mozart and culture, might well find that it's quite enjoyable, not a bad, rather different sort of afternoon. And so the easygoing person has become stronger. He's found more fields for enjoyment, whereas the brittle person has become weaker. Although they've got more, every time they do that they gain power, they have confirmed the thing that they cannot stand football. In other words, it's something which they could not tolerate. And so I think it's helpful to consider that when people talk about, strong government, we want strong leaders and that sort of thing, that very often these so-called strong leaders are people who are so brittle that no one actually dares to give them the truth because they wouldn't be able to stand it. Now, in those terms, a lot of magical training is much more about building strength than about exercising power. It's a bit like, you think of, the strongest people, you might think of, Olympic athletes. Now, how do they get so strong? It was by giving away their power to a trainer who shouts at them and bullies them and makes them work incredibly hard, and it builds them up. And there's similar things with magic. If you look at Crowley's sort of instructions, 8 lessons on yoga, or some of the magical exercises, they're real strength-building exercises. Gives you tremendous will and persistence. And so I believe that power is not the fundamental driver in magic, and it is going more towards completion, whether it is finding your true will, or knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, or working through the planetary forces until you can invoke them all equally, finding all those different parts of yourself, some are weaker and some are stronger, and building them up until you have all those abilities. And a lot of the practices are to develop the strength. Now, even in the case of demonic magic, where one wants the power of some mighty demon, the actual practice is not so much about removing the power from that demon and wielding it, but having the strength, firstly, to be able to order the demon to do what you want, but also the strength not to succumb to that demon. And that is a very difficult thing, because if, say, the demon is to gain political power, it is so seductive that it becomes a thing which then dominates you. Whereas actually, if you've got the strength to be able to use a bit of that demon but not give in to it, that is really a much more magical way of working. Now, I suggest this because when I wrote Sesopomy, I wasn't trying to sort of define a new school of magic. I think, looking in hindsight, I was trying to do something rather like Crowley when he wrote Magic in Theory and Practice. He wasn't at that point setting out a new thelemic system of magic in those opening chapters. I think he was saying, look, here's a subject where a lot of people have got some weird ideas about it. Let's try to get back to basics and sort of analyse what this is about. And that's really what I was trying to do in Sesopomy. And I like to think that someone, an experienced magician reading Sesotme, might begin on the first page by saying, what's this got to do with magic? And I made the point of using the capital M when I wrote about my idea of magic. But I like to think as he went through it, the people would begin to say, yeah, that's right, this really is about magic. This is a new way of looking at magic, and it's helpful. So I think magic is about wholeness more than power. But there may be people who don't agree with that. Have I just talked about my own version of magic? Or is this really how it is?